And welcome to the Unconventional Path, Entrepreneurship and Innovation Stories and Ideas. I'm Bela Musits.
And I'm Mike Wasserman.
Mike, today our guest is Gorm Tuxen. He has a very, very interesting background. He came to the United States from Denmark to open a furniture distribution business. And today he runs several companies specializing in security and technology, serving clients all around the globe. And he's also written a book with the title of Immigrant Entrepreneurship in America. I found our conversation to be very informative and quite fascinating.
Sounds interesting, Bela. I think listeners will want to keep an ear open for some really clear advice on business development, on B2B sales, on growth strategies, and some really cool insights into looking at the important and dynamic relationship between immigration and entrepreneurship in the United States. So let's get right to your interview with Gorm Tuxen.
Hi, Gorm. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Sure. Hey, let me ask you a question. If you're at a social event, a non-work related, non-business social event, and you get introduced to someone, and after that introduction, they say to you, "So nice to meet you, Gorm. What do you do?" How do you answer that question?
Let me start off by saying I do international business development. That would probably the best umbrella for where I am right now. I mean, I've done a lot of things in my life. I've started several companies, some successful, some not so much. But that's sort of the umbrella. It's always been something with international business, whether it was being imported, exported, and then I had a stint in the technology business for 10 years. I actually started in the furniture business and transferred over to the technology business in the early 90s, and working for the world's largest parking meter manufacturer. And I got my technology credentials by real-time learning during that time. And so, I kind of migrated from furniture into high tech. And today we have a number of businesses that work on the agency side of it, basically having deep engagement with a client, taking them from early introduction in the United States to actually representing them. And then we have a couple of companies that are more design job shops where we work with other integrators in the security and the parking business to design specialty type systems. So.
Oh, very nice. Very nice. Wonderful background. So it turns out you and I have something in common. We're both immigrants. So,
Yeah, I hear that.
Yeah. Yeah. So tell me a little bit about what country you immigrated from and what year.
And so I come from Denmark originally. Came here first time as an exchange student in 75, 76. My dad was born in Asheville, Minnesota. My grandfather immigrated in 1928, so his timing was perfect. And by 1932, he went back to Denmark on a $300 stipend from his mom, and basically brought 5 kids back to Denmark. And my dad stayed in Denmark. His brother joined the U.S. Air Force at 18, so there was always this connection with the United States. It was, and it was all very mysterious back then because there was no internet, there was no nothing. It was just way over there, and so I had the fascination, and so I kind of grew up with that. And then at the end of my high school year, I had an opportunity to come as an exchange student, and they sent me to Memphis, Tennessee. I read up on it in my parents' encyclopedia, but I'm not sure Lindbergh had flown the Atlantic yet in the version that they had. And so, it wasn't quite what I expected when I arrived. And yet again, nobody knew anything about Memphis other than maybe Elvis. So it was an incredible cultural experience for me, where, I was 17 years old. I was out on my own. I lived with a host family that had a German Shepherd, and they thought a teenager worked the same way, but that didn't quite work out that way. So got a couple of really good friends, had a wonderful stay, came back to Denmark just enamored with the U.S. and decided that was my destiny. That's where I needed to go. And from that point on, I pretty much picked every school, everything to support the goal of having somebody sponsor me to come back to the U.S. And so I came back in 1982, and I wrote a graduate study on setting up a subsidiary for the largest Danish furniture manufacturer in the U.S. They put me in the Midwest and told me I couldn't call on any of the conventional customers because they were being serviced from Denmark already. And so, I got a car, drove about 75,000 miles in the Midwest and tore up every yellow page book I could find and basically did it the good old way and, the old fashioned way. And at the end of it, we started getting outlets that were carrying little Scandinavian galleries throughout the Midwest. And so that's how I came over. So
Wonderful. And so talk a little bit about that first business, right? It sounds like there was an existing company. They said, Gorm, we're sending you to this territory. You can't call on existing customers, develop some new business for us.
Yeah. Yes.
So talk about sort of those early days and what that was like.
It was super challenging. I mean, I had to deal with everything because I knew little or nothing. I mean, even with my exchange student days, I had a network of things. Here I had nothing. I couldn't go back to my employer because they didn't know. I mean, they typically got off in Chicago and went to see a couple of Danish guys and they bought some furniture and then they went home again. And I was out here in the Wild West, drumming up business but I was determined to make it a success. And our marketing program was pretty good. We set up a warehouse in Racine, Wisconsin with a Danish transportation firm. And so we could warehouse stuff instead of selling whole containers over. We would stock it, and then we could send it with common carrier to these various furniture stores as an introduction to the product, And then we had some flyers with some nice blonde ladies from Denmark on it and some good looking furniture and stuff. And they would get some of those to distribute, which was a big deal because they weren't getting marketing material from anybody else that they were representing. So this was something they could hand out, mail out, and we would prorate a certain number of flyers based on how much their investment was in this gallery. And we started really small, we didn't ask much. And we didn't ask them to stop. That was a big thing. So because it had the money up in it. So that really helped, grow a relationship. And we had constant engagement because they had to deal with the inventory. So they had to call us. And we also got the statistics, which were in one case where I got it sold in with Wix Furniture in Chicago, in a super big store. And the buyer there, I knew his statistics better than he knew them. And so I pretty much wound up writing the purchase orders for him whenever I was in the office. And they went from a few small galleries to being a direct importer on a really high level. And it became a big part of their business for a number of years, the old Scandinavian, furniture thing. So the really important thing I learned was niche marketing, because everything was niche. So we're in a niche country with a niche product. It doesn't look anything like American furniture. How do you put that in with a bunch of big overstuffed couches, and all of a sudden you got this streamlined Danish stuff? How does that go together? Does that even belong together? So overcoming the objections to the stylistic part of it, and then rationalizing the business part of it, and formulating that into something that was that you could get your hands around without a huge investment. It was really what we managed to do, and we became very successful.
Yeah.
And then eventually,
I didn't mean to cut you off. Please continue.
No, and then eventually, my two bosses and I went into a retail store in Nashville, Tennessee together, because we'd been so successful throughout the Midwest, working sort of the unknown territories, if you will. So
nice. That's a great story. So it sounds like maybe you did a fair amount of what some people would call cold calling
Oh,
on
yeah.
potential customers. So
Oh, yeah.
great. I'd like to talk about that a little more because I think one of the challenges for entrepreneurs,
Yeah.
particularly ones that are technology entrepreneurs, they know all about the technology, but then they got to go make a cold call. They got to go sell to a customer. First, they got to get the customer to open the door and let them in.
Yeah.
So what sort of words of advice do you have for someone who's trying to figure out how to do that?
Listen to your customer before you start focusing on what you have to sell. Because the first thing you have to establish is what is their need. If you're not selling into a need, you're not selling into anything. And technology has this mystery component. Everybody thinks that if they have everybody thinks they have the greatest technology stuff. And everybody has a tendency to think they're smarter than anybody else. Those are two things that are just not a good cocktail in trying to make money. It may be great to get you on a podium somewhere, but it's not going to get anything sold. So both in the development of your product and your introduction of your product, you need to understand what you're developing to. So when you meet with the customer, you're speaking to a need. Now, I understand that in technology, everybody is bleeding edge and they're introducing something they think is a disruptor of sorts. Most likely it is a disruptor. But then you have to let the customer talk the journey to connect with their current reality to what the technology solution you have is, because you're taking them into unknown territory. So unless you want to spend a lot of money in, trying to educate them, then you need to, it's like anything else, you need to connect with relevance. If you have no relevance, you have no business. And that seems to be, in the entrepreneurial world these days, we have such a confusion around what the whole process is, right? I have a great idea. I'm so smart. I just graduated. I got this trinket, or I have this software, or I have whatever that I've put together. It's going to save the world. It's all wonderful, but no relevance is established. And also, the first thing that tend to be asked for is money. Well, that's very interesting. You have a trinket, but you haven't gotten any clue about what the need in the market is. You have established no relevance. And granted, there are technology investment companies out there that will take high-flying bids for reasons unbeknownst to me. I wouldn't do it, but in my world, I will invest money with you when you've established relevance and a need. Other than that, you have a great idea. Maybe we can work from there. Granted, but a lot of work needs to be done. So my advice is don't look for the money. Look for the relevance. Okay. I mean, it may be what you're working on is a stepping stone to something else that has relevance, but it's not exactly what you're working on now. That's another place where a lot of money is being spent. Is as the development goes by, the first time there's a prototype, somebody thinks they have a product. No, you have a prototype, which is something you designed. God bless you. That's wonderful. I'm happy for you. That's great. So academically, that places as a win. But in the business world, it just places as maybe a path to somewhere. So given that guidance is a lot of what we do, both in established companies and with startup companies, is to make them understand where they are in the journey and find the humility to get themselves in the right place, because it's going to save them a ton of money in dealing with all these assumptions that are going to turn out to be invalid.
Right. Excellent. That was one of the best sort of overall views of selling technology and understanding customer needs and putting that first I've ever heard. So let me ask you a related question. If I'm selling a non-technical product like furniture, how is it different?
That's more of a, furniture, for instance, is a very emotional thing, right? Because it's about looks, it's about feel, it's about, style, and it's about it's going to be about comfort. You sit on the couch, it's not very comfortable. That's not very good. So, in that arena, and in general, when you talk about consumer products more and more, you have to build an emotional relevance to the art. and even in technology, that becomes more and more the case, that you have to have an emotional tangent that plays with your core message. So it's about feel good. It's about, I can relate to this. I can see this in my environment. This represents me. So my wife has a fashion store, and she can tell you everything about that. Where it's very, she just came home from a market this week, and she was buying the fall collection, right? And I'm like, oh my gosh, you're already in fall? And she goes, yeah. And so there was one company there, for instance, that she had done business with for years, that she said, their collection sucks this year. I'm just not going to do business with them. I'm going to take that money and I'm going to put it somewhere else. So, you get into consumer products and things that have, major emotional relevance, that becomes a big thing. And again, with technology, a lot of technology is about making the user feel like they're hit, right? Unless if you get in the industrial technological segment, then it's about efficiency. Then it's about what does it actually do? Does it connect the dots? Does it move the data from one to the other? Those types of things. So, but it's never about what it is. It's about what it's being perceived to be.
Excellent. Excellent. So let me slice that a different way now.
Okay.
What's the difference between selling to an end customer versus selling to a retailer or a distributor?
Okay. So selling to an end customer is a lot more transactional. And I think in today's environment, if somebody starts up a retail business, for instance, like my wife, it's all about customer service. There is no customer service in retail anymore. I was in a Macy's store yesterday in Springfield, Missouri, north of here. And the thing, I know they're in chapter 11, and they look at, you walk in there and you go, are you kidding me, man? There's, 3 people on the floor. There's nothing on the racks. If I didn't have a specific mission there for some perfume for my wife's birthday today, I wouldn't have gone in there. I would have gotten scared off by the time I got out of the men's bathroom. So, retail is about customer service. It's about people, because you can get the product anywhere. That doesn't mean it. So it has to be an experience. It has to be something where they come in and feel like they're extremely well taken care of. In my wife's business, I call it a shopping club, because it's really more of a club than it is a retail business. She has customers that will come for every sale, participate in everything, spread the word, do all that. And she still has built that business over 25 years in a very limited budget. So, but it's the old arts that are getting forgotten in some cases, and they're more important today than they ever were.
Yeah. I think you're, particularly when it comes to consumer goods and particularly retail, you need to give people a reason to come into your retail establishment.
Absolutely, because that in itself is considered an effort, right? It's much easier to punch the button on Amazon and have it on your doorstep tomorrow, right? So that's what everybody's fighting. So it isn't about the product, it's about the experience.
That's right. Excellent. So what about some sort of observations or lessons learned in sort of building and growing a business?
Well, that's always like we talked about. One faux pas in my book is to go out and try to get a whole bunch of other people involved in the business. If you have an idea, you have a simple thing you need to deal with first. That's your risk. If you want to be an entrepreneur and you want to start a business, you have to face risk, and you have to make it your friend. If you don't make it your friend, you'll be scared out of your ever-loving life all the time. That's no fun. It's like asking people to invest in stocks that are way beyond their comprehensions, that are wild shot or go gamble in Vegas beyond their means. You have to understand that the business and the mistakes you make in the business are going to inform you about how you redirect your efforts. Then risk is your friend. Risk kills you if you don't anticipate. I'm not saying you can have a plan for every contingency. I never had, but I had some idea about what I was going to do. The first thing I wasn't going to do was panic. And the second thing I was going to do was find out what is the problem actually, and then try to fix it. And then in the growing of the business, for most small businesses, it's about cash, right? It's about how do I build something from nothing? That's everybody's dream. Well, all the way from nothing, I don't know. I was fortunate enough when I did my furniture store to have my two former bosses come in as partners, and they gave us some consignment inventory to work with, and so we could deal somewhat with cash flow and the fact that we would be importing in large quantities and things like that. And it gave us some starting cash and some stability in the business. And I think that's one of the things you really need to think about is, what do you do? Okay. If you're in a retail business, you're investing in inventory. Inventory becomes your cash, because that's where all your cash is going to go. It's not going to go in the bank. You know, you have a great month, you make $20,000. Do you think you're going to see it on your bank account? No, you're going to see your accounts payables go down. So, you know, you have to understand how to live and be okay with living on a very minimal budget in the beginning, and commit yourself to the fact that this is not a sacrifice. This is not something, oh, I can't wait till I get rich. But it just doesn't work though. It works every day. You dog it, you do something, you make a difference, you make notes of where you were and what you learned that day, and you move on and you keep moving the needle. And before long, you'll find out you're on your way to a graduate degree or you're bankrupt, either one.
Right. Right. Hey, so I have another question, particularly with like a furniture store, or like your wife's store, or if you're the distributor, you own the inventory. So
Yes.
what do you do with what is called distressed inventory, right? So it's not selling through. I own it. I got to do something with it. What's your sort of approach to that?
Again, like my wife's store is a really good example, because fashion things turn fast, right? And
Yeah.
you've been lined up with a stack, and you made a bad choice. You bought a bad season, right? Get rid of it. Get your cash back. Okay. Don't sit there and meander. Oh, I lost this, I lost that. No, because the longer you sit on it, the longer you have that cash tied up that you can't do something else with. Cash is king. You got to have cash to buy the next season. If you don't have that cash, guess what? Then you don't have anything to make the losses. Now, you come in with a deficit, fine. It's just, but what did you learn from it? You know, what did you learn from that purchasing decision? That wasn't in line with my customer. It wasn't a good season. You know, it wasn't the right couches, or whatever it is. Technology is it's a little bit a little bit different, because a lot of times it becomes line items where you've got, in our business we deal with long range readers and identification devices for toll roads, for nuclear power plants, for the military, for gated neighborhoods, for all that kind of stuff. And so there it was really a problem of establishing a very deep distribution relationship in the Americas with a bunch of resellers, all over the Americas, to have them get the message of relevance to the end users. And from that point forward, it becomes rather predictable. So the other thing is, does it take a lot of SKUs to run your business? How many SKUs do you need? Okay, because the more SKUs you have, the more risks you have that something is not going to be a hit. And I think that's like in the fashion business a lot, where you see some of the major lines, you walk in, there's hardly anything but wall, right? And there's some really expensive dresses. Well, that's a smart way to do it. If you own the brand and you're that dominant, you don't really need all that inventory. You just need to make good margin on whatever you hang in that store. So be really aware of cash flow, and be really aware of some of those things.
Yeah. Yeah. Excellent. I'm going to switch gears a little bit. You've also written a book. Tell us about the book.
Well, so, after all these years, I have been sort of mentoring to a lot of my employees. And I've really enjoyed that. I have a wonderful staff, and the mentoring part was always a big part of it. How can I take what I've learned and pass it on to somebody else to give them maybe a different starting, and of course, I've also been blessed with people that actually cared to listen and trust the advice that were given, and take it on the road themselves and see if it works for them in whatever form or fashion they wanted to. So I was given an opportunity early last year to publish a book, and I thought, well, maybe I should do that. And the whole idea with the book is to sort of have a curriculum. It's not an autobiography. It's an autobiography to the extent that my history is in there as a point of relevance for why you should think about these things, because it actually happened to me. So I'm hoping it makes it authentic rather than a textbook where you say, 2 and 2 is 4, because in the real world, that's rarely the case. And so I'm trying to paint between the lines, and especially on the, maybe the psychological part of owning a business and being an entrepreneur, the mindset of being an entrepreneur, the mindset of dealing with loss, the mindset of that didn't work out. How do you get back on your feet again, or you just get up and say, okay, I'm just going to take a job and that'll be it, with the hope that people that are doing it or that would like to do it, or heck, our biggest client is a big security company out of Holland, and we've dealt with them for 25 years, and the American market is brand new to them. They might as well have been an entrepreneur. And that's a lot of what we do with the overseas partners that we have is make them understand you're brand new, you know nothing. So anyway, I thought it might be a good idea to put it in a book and put it out there and share it. You go through your entire life, you learn all these lessons. They're only as good as they're used. And so I thought that might be an opportunity for me to share that with people and be of some help that way.
Very nice. And now give us the title of the book and where people can get it.
Okay, it's Immigrant Entrepreneurship in America, and Insights from the Journey to Success. And you can get it on Amazon. It's a #1 on Amazon, and you can get it in any other bookstore. I've already sold a few copies overseas, and so it's available anywhere. So
super. So what's different about immigrant entrepreneurship?
Well, it's the fact that as an immigrant, when you come in and you don't know anything, you just see things from a different perspective, and just from a point of survival, you need to make sure that you see and interpret everything so you don't get in harm's way. And that's a whole different perspective, because as you walk among the general population, they're very much at ease with everything because they know how to live in this country. They know how things work to a large extent, maybe not everything, but enough to not get in trouble. Once you get off that bridgeway from the airplane, you don't know anything. It's brand new, and then you have to operate in it. But the funny thing is, because you don't know what you're looking for, things will appear that gets lost in the myriad to other people. So you'll notice things, you go, why is that way? Or why does it do that? Or why do they do that? And so in my world, that has led to a lot of the finding the opportunities. We talked about needs and relevance, right? Well, that's very much expressed in what you have in front of you. So as an immigrant, you don't come at it with a standard approach. You try to find your way. So I think it just kind of takes a filter away on the opportunity side. And the other side is, if you're worth your salt, you don't come here expecting handouts. You come here because you feel that you can be a part of the American dream, and you can be a contributor, and you can do well. You want to compete. In my book, American immigration wasn't built on charity. It was built on hard works of all of our forefathers that came here, and how they invested themselves in this country, and how they, through their efforts, contributed to the whole of America, to what America is today. That's what built this country. So, and in some of the rhetoric that's going on today, we kind of lose track of what's a migrant and what's an immigrant. A migrant is somebody that decided to position themselves here legally or not legally. An immigrant is somebody that went through the hard way, the camel through the needle's eye, and when you go through that effort and you want it that bad, you come here on a mission. And I'm sure for the rest of our fellow citizens, they'd like to have an appreciation of the fact that those are the kinds of people that we want to come to this country, no matter where they come from. It's an attitude, and it's a, and I normally say good character is attitude, aptitude, and altitude, right? In attitude, yeah, you have the right character. Aptitude, you're willing to learn, and altitude is that you're ambitious enough that you're going to carry through whatever it takes to get you there.
Yeah, excellent. I often think about, as I shared with you earlier before we start recording, I'm an immigrant, came to this country in 1956 from Hungary. There was a revolution going on. My father, my mother, and myself, the three of us came. I was just a little kid. And my father decided to leave the country that he was born in, right? So that in itself is a big decision.
Oh, huge. Yeah.
Right. And leave not under good circumstances, because there's a war going on. And then come to another place where you don't speak the language. You, like you said, nothing, absolutely nothing. And that's a motivated individual.
Yes.
Right.
That is for sure. That's
a motivated, driven individual who's not, as you said earlier about entrepreneurship, not afraid, understands and can deal with and manage and live with risk.
Yes, exactly. And I think in deference to your question earlier about, the immigrant side of it, on entrepreneurship, then you're already predisposed to that. You're not expecting somebody to come pick you up, or you don't show up with an attitude that you're entitled to something. In many cases, your education doesn't translate directly into the American system. So trying to get a job with a company and explaining what your educational background is can be hard, unless you come in for an H-1B where somebody sponsored you. But I mean, if you come in like I did, it would be hard to explain, exactly what is it. And, it would take some work to get that all translated and whatnot. And you wouldn't be in line at the front of the line, So
That's right. That's right. So let me ask you one more question about the whole immigrant entrepreneurship thing. Are there some real strong disadvantages to being an immigrant entrepreneur? Things that people are going to have to overcome? I mean, we just talked about a couple of them, right? A different education system, not knowing the language, et cetera. Those are sort of the obvious ones. Are there other ones that are sort of more, maybe not as obvious to people?
Well, yeah, there is. What I see, kind of counting myself as part of the immigrant community is that, coming from Denmark, we blend in pretty well because there's not that many of us. I like to say if there was ever a minority in America, it would be Danish immigrants. But depending on what the different groups are, and you've seen that throughout history. When we had the big immigrations from Italy, we had the big immigrations from Ireland during the potato famine and all that kind of stuff. Immigrants can tend to cluster together. And there's nothing wrong with that. It's the old prairie philosophy that we need others to protect us. But the larger immigration groups start defining themselves by what that group is in the country. And what they fail to do is to, integrate, to really, truly on an individual basis become part of America, because it becomes a spectator sport. They converge with their local community, and they have an opinion about what the other people do, but they justify it by the group saying, yeah, I feel the same way. But you don't learn that way. You don't become an American that way. That's why a lot of times it takes to the second generation, because they go to school and they're forced into being a part of America, and their English is going to be obviously fluent, and they're gonna have that foundational hole in the ground as citizens that their parents didn't have, because they chose to find security in the community of people that were from the same place.
Yes. That's an interesting observation, because as you're saying that, I was thinking about my experience. And when we first came to this country, we were in a sort of a community where there was a lot of Hungarian immigrants and a lot of Hungarians. And we were sort of, sponsored there and kind of brought into that community. And we lived there for 5 or 6 years. And I think it was very comfortable, particularly for my mom, who, didn't work, but she had other Hungarian friends and could speak the language and get assistance and stuff. And then after about 5 or 6 years, my dad took a different job and we sort of broke out of that community. The other places we lived, we might run into a Hungarian person every now and then, but there was no community there.
Exactly.
I never thought of it as the way you described it, as that's almost a necessary step if you want to assimilate and sort of be part of the country that you're in, as opposed to trying to keep your own tribe in one place.
Exactly. And then validate your own tribe as a tribe within America. No, an American is somebody who's part of America. It's somebody who understands what this country is, believes in who we are and what we do, is willing to contribute, is willing to be non-judgmental about other people, creed, color, sex, whatever. It's somebody who understands the blessing we've been given by our forefathers, that this is an invitation for you to be a part of the only country in the world that has been put together of people from all over the place. It's the Tower of Babylon, and we actually found a language to keep speaking, so we built it, right? But if you concentrate all your energy and all your social interaction, whatever, to the community group, you become a polity, within America, and I think that's very dangerous. And I think it's also something. It absolutely has a place. I mean, when my grandfather came over in 1928, he went to Esco, Minnesota. Why? Because there were a bunch of Danish farmers up there, right? So, and they went to Iowa and North Dakota and places like that. But that is not unusual, and that definitely has its place. But when we get to talk about integration, we have to be speaking one language. We have to have a standard for what you need to meet, not just for the good of the country, but for the good of the individuals that come here, because they are able to cope with things much better. And then we avoid this. We have certain rights or privileges or whatever. No, we have the rights that are bestowed upon us in the Constitution. That's it, pal. Other than that, hard work, good intentions, go out there and make a killing. So I think that's kind of a sociological kind of a phenomenon that has existed over time, but we haven't really thought about what it means down the road. So
yeah, very good. Hey, that was a great conversation. I'll start wrapping this up. Hey, Gorm, is there anything that I haven't asked you that you'd like to share with our listeners?
Well, I think we've covered a lot of stuff. I mean, I hope people will take an interest in the book, because I think it reflects a lot of what we've talked about here. And I hope that, my hope was that it would be an inspiration to people to find their own vantage point. I mean, it's, in the book, I talk about, well, if you can't see success from where you are, maybe you need to find a different vantage point. People get stuck in a rut. They become myopic in the way that they're looking at things, and then they get caught in fear and can't get out of their own way. And I think that gut feeling, that because it's not about being a hero or anything like that. It's about managing to that. I mean, if you ask a soldier, have they been afraid? If they're not lying, they'll tell you, yeah, all the time. But can you manage that? Is that what you want to do? And if you're an immigrant, you have all the opportunities. Just recognize the fact that you have that different vantage point. So
yeah, excellent. Give us the title of the book one more time, Gorm.
It's Immigrant Entrepreneurship in America.
Excellent. Thank you so much for being on the podcast. I really enjoyed our conversation today. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Bela, really cool. And as you mentioned, you and I both share this former entrepreneurship and immigrant background. Of course, you immigrated with your family from Hungary to the US, and I, of course, immigrated in the other direction from the US to Germany. But these themes are relevant to both of us, and these are things that you and I have talked about a lot in our free time. Gorm's story is interesting on several different dimensions. What were your main takeaways?
Mike, my number one takeaway, and I didn't figure this out until after my conversation with him, was that your current job is actually preparing you for your next job. And that's how you should think about it. So you should think about your current job as, what can I learn here? What skills can I acquire? What knowledge can I acquire? What can I learn about the industry? What can I learn about my skills? How can I develop those things? Because what this is doing is preparing you for your next job. Now, that may be the next job in the same organization. It may be the next job in a different organization, but certainly in today's world, it's pretty rare for someone to stay in the same position for 20, 30 years. So to me, that was sort of number one takeaway. And I think it's something that I always knew. And if I reflect back on my career, it's certainly true, but the light bulb never went off in my head to be able to sort of articulate it that way until I had this conversation with Gorm. The other interesting thing is his first assignment was to set up another channel in the United States and grow a business. Now, that's a pretty big undertaking, right? Because the company already had an existing channel. So he's setting up another channel. And so what did he have to do? And this is one of I think the hardest things in sort of sales and market development. He's doing cold calling, right? He's just walking in to his potential customer. And what does he do? He establishes relevance. I thought that was a key sort of insight that he shared with us. He established relevance. He connected with the customer's need, right? And he did that by really knowing his customer. I thought it was interesting. I think he said it more than once. There were times that he would walk into a potential customer or an existing customer, and he would know more about their sales data and who their customers are than that person who actually runs the business did. I just thought that, that's coming prepared, as they say. So I thought that was really important. And I think the other takeaway goes back to my first comment, is that he learned and increased his skills and knowledge along the way. And one of the important things that he used that increase in skills and knowledge was to make himself more valuable to his customer. So he thought about himself as, I'm an asset to you, the customer. So I'm helping the customer, help the customer grow the business. Don't just think about this as transactions. Here, I'm selling this. How many do you want? Let me take the order. See ya. Bye. No, understand the customer's business, because remember, you have a lot more knowledge than they do from the market. You're talking to 20 of those people all around the country. And you can say, hey, in California, they're trying this and it seems to be connecting. Maybe you should try that here. Make yourself valuable to your customer. I think that's a real key aspect of sales. So those were sort of my quick takeaways. What about you, Mike?
Yeah, I totally agree, Bela. I mean, this was, as I said earlier, a masterclass on kind of business development and B2B sales, right? I just don't have anything to add. I mean, it was brilliant, right? So yeah, I guess I don't have much to add there, but one of the things that I would like to talk about with you is how has this interview aligned with, again, a topic that you and I have talked a lot about, your perspective on immigration and entrepreneurship?
Yeah, that's a good question. One of the takeaways for me is risk. How do you manage risk? Like, I think about, my mom and my dad and myself. 1956, my dad decides, hey, we're leaving Hungary. We're getting out of here. And he walked away from a business. He walked away from family. He walked away from everything. And, walked across the border into Austria, ended up here in the United States. Had nothing. Now, talk about risk. But he used that risk to drive him and motivate him. he didn't let the risk paralyze him or distract him. He used it as a focal point and a motivator. And I think that's a key skill, that if you can figure out how to manage risk, and by manage risk, there's a lot of elements to that. There's the emotional element of it, because if you're not careful, it'll drive you freaking crazy. So you got to figure out how to do that. And I think that's, entrepreneurs understand that, and immigrants understand that, because that's their whole life. I think the other interesting thing in my conversation with Gorm was, immigrants look through a different filter. So when they look out into a community, or they look out into a potential market, their glasses filter things differently, because their life experience is so different. And I think immigrants can often see opportunity that we who've been here for 20 or 30 years just don't see, and we miss them. So I think that's really neat. And I think the other important thing that he talked about, and I saw this in my own family, it's break out of your group. If you're an immigrant, doesn't matter. If you're an immigrant, if you're a software person, it doesn't matter what sort of group you identify with. You got to take some time to break out of that group and go explore other groups, and don't stay within your confined group or your label, however you want to describe this, all the time. And the good example here that we talked about in the podcast was immigrants, and you settle into a community of Hungarians, and then so you speak Hungarian all the time. The little Hungarian bodega opens up. It's like living back in the old country, but you're not living in the old country. You're living in Allentown, Pennsylvania, in this little 3-block area, and you got to break out. And then you'll see opportunities, you'll get more knowledge, you'll assimilate, and I think that's where success comes from. So anyway, a little bit of a lot of different topics there, but that's sort of one of the key takeaways I got from my conversation.
Yeah, I mean, couldn't agree more. I immigrated much older than you did, Bela, but everything that you say, I think, applies to my experiences too, albeit in the other direction. But yeah, it takes, you have to take a lot of risk, when you immigrate. And yeah, looking at things through a different filter, check. I certainly do. And even though I've worked really hard, ich spreche Deutsch, I worked really hard to learn German and to adopt the culture, and I don't have any American friends. I don't really have any non-German friends, right? Our social groups are German. We do things in German. We, our world tries to be as integrated as possible. And we're always learning new things. But I think if you walk in those shoes, then you maybe kind of realize a little bit, regardless of your position on immigration or your political persuasion, that just have a little empathy. And I get it, why people feel sometimes that there's too many immigrants or something like this. They feel threatened by immigrants. But I think this perspective, the way Gorm put it, right, is nice for people to think about how important immigrants are to the fiber of the United States experience. And maybe you view all immigrants a certain way, but get to know the ones in your neighborhood who are running the businesses. I think you'll find that they have amazing stories, that they're bold and strong and interesting, and they have something to offer. Give them a chance. Don't judge until you've met them, right? I think that's the rule. It's okay if you can be angry at a certain individual person, you don't like the way they run their business or something, but don't paint all immigrants with the same picture, with the same paintbrush, because I've met lots of amazing immigrants in my life. Right now you're listening to 2 of them, right? And Gorm is the third, right? That these are people that have a tremendous amount to offer if you give them an opportunity. And then the other thing that's important is it's the second generation that always integrates well, right? It's the kids, right? Bela, you're a great example of this, right? I mean, you grew up speaking English. You grew up, you didn't have the same struggles that your parents did. And then look what you passed on to your kids, right? Your kids are now second generation and doing amazing things. We all pay taxes. We all vote. We all contribute to the community in lots of different ways. So I think the message that Gorm was saying was a nice way to put it, no matter where you lie in the political spectrum, to understand this interconnectedness that immigration entrepreneurship has, and it can create value. that isn't a universal statement, but that's saying the importance of immigration and entrepreneurship are something that's fit together in the history of the U.S. and really of most other countries in some way, shape, or form. So yeah, and open your eyes, open your heart a little bit, have a little empathy, right? And see where it takes you.
Yeah.
What do you think?
I think one of the things you said, I think, was interesting. I remember this from, I don't know what grade it was, 9th or 10th grade. We were reading a book about Abraham Lincoln, and this is before he was president. And Abraham Lincoln was in Congress. He was on the floor of Congress, and he was talking to another congressperson. And that congressperson said to Abe Lincoln, "See George up there in the balcony? I think he's a jerk." And Abraham Lincoln said, "You know what? I think I agree with you, but I need to get to know him better." That's exactly to the point of, meet people.
Yep.
It's the unknown that often makes you draw conclusions. It's what you don't know that drives your conclusion, and your conclusion should be based on direct observation and direct interaction, not second or third or fourth hand. And I still remember that that's the only thing I remember from that book on Abe Lincoln, right? It stuck with me all the time. If you see someone and you go, you reach out to them. It's amazing. And anyway, enough said.
Yeah, if you've got an immigrant owned or run small business in your neighborhood, give it a try. If you have it, right?
Exactly.
If you don't like it, great. You tried it. You don't like it. That's fine. But give it a try and then decide. Right?
And try it with an open mind.
Yep.
Don't walk in there already knowing what the conclusion is.
Yep.
Got to try it with an open mind. Anyway, all right. Should we wrap this one up, Mike?
Yeah, let's do it. My sense is that hopefully today this discussion has enlightened people not only on B2B sales and business development, but also this relationship between immigration and entrepreneurship and how critical empathy and respect are to make the world a better place, no matter what neighborhood you live in and what business you're in. But yeah, Gorm was a great guest and a great interview. Hopefully, listeners, you found this interesting and thought-provoking as well. If you've got questions, you agree, you disagree, please feel free to get in touch with us. Our email is bela.and.mike@gmail.com.
And finally, if you like the podcast, please hit that like or follow button on your favorite podcasting app. Our podcast is also now available on YouTube. And if you know of someone that would be a good guest for the show, reach out to us and let us know. So until next time, signing off from upstate New York. Take care.
And Bela, always great to work with you. Listeners, hope to see you next time. From over here in Münster, Germany, I'll say goodbye in German. Auf Wiedersehen.